I've always believed love lives in the quiet routines, the soft places between the big events. Jake and I weren't flashy. We didn't throw dinner parties or post curated selfies from vacations. We liked slow Saturday mornings, strong coffee, and walking scout through the creaky trails behind our neighborhood in East Austin. Our bungalow isn't big, but every inch of it has our fingerprints. The olive green front door was Jake's idea, the brass antique knobs mine. We fought about the hallway paint color for 3 weeks and ended up laughing about it while taping the edges with old Netflix reruns playing in the background. That house feels like an extension of us, weathered in places, a little uneven but full of intention. Jake works in tech. Some AI startup with a sleek office downtown, neon signs on the walls, catered lunches, and pitch decks that sound like they were written by philosophers. I don't pretend to understand it, but he lights up when he talks about neural networks and predictive learning. I run a small gallery 2 blocks from 6th Street. It's nothing huge, just 6 rooms and a courtyard strung with Edison bulbs, but it pays the bills and I get to curate emerging Texas artists who paint with rust and resin and all kinds of chaos. Jake calls it my weird little world, and I always take it as a compliment. We'll hit our 7-year anniversary in 3 weeks. 7 years, some people say the 7th year is the one where the edges start to fray, but for us it feels soft. Settled, like we finally learned how to live inside the same silence without needing to fill it. That's why I wanted Napa. He's always dreamed of going tasting rooms, vineyard walks, those rustic inns with clawfoot tubs and fireplaces you actually use. He mentioned it once years ago in passing. One day when we're real adults, let's go to Napa. I remembered. I remember everything he says, even when he forgets what he meant. So I started planning. I cashed out a commission bonus from a gallery sale and booked us 4 nights at this converted barn with a view of the valley. I even scheduled a private wine blending session and made dinner reservations at this Michelin-starred place where the dessert comes with a handwritten poem. It was going to be a surprise. I bought a vintage wine crate and tucked the itinerary and gift card inside, next to a bottle of Cabernet from our first trip together in Fredericksburg. I was going to give it to him the night before after dinner when Scout was curled up between us and the house smelled like lemon and rosemary. But I guess what they say is true, perfection is often the first sign something about to break. Because lately, Jake S. been elsewhere. Not distant exactly, just paused like a phone on silent, and at first I chalked it up to stress. The new client at work, the Ambertech pitch he kept referencing, the pressure of delivering on his team's product rollout, but there were small things, texts left unread, dinner left untouched, the way he stood in the hallway with his phone cupped to his chest, whispering into it like it might explode. Still, I didn't let it bother me. I wanted Napa to be a reminder, not of what we were losing, but what we'd built. I still believed in us. I didn't know back then that the trip I planned to celebrate our life would become the first step away from it, but the illusion held for a little while longer and I held on with it. The first crack didn't show up as something loud, it wasn't shouting or slammed doors or lipstick on a collar. It was quieter than that, almost polite. The kind of crack that could pass for coincidence if you wanted it to. Jake started coming home later, not unusually so, just enough to blur the lines of routine. Dinner would be warm, but the candles I used to light went untouched. He'd text me around 6, "Don't wait up, running late on Ambertech again." That name started to show up everywhere, Ambertech, the mysterious new client. It sounded important, like something that demanded all of him. He said they were high-pressure, West Coast types, venture capital, product deadlines, user testing, strategic overhauls. They're bleeding money and expecting miracles, he'd mutter, shrugging off his coat. This isn't just a job, this is career-defining. And then he'd lean down and kiss my forehead like punctuation, like a full stop to a conversation I hadn't even started. His phone changed next. It was always on him, in the bathroom. In bed in the backyard while walking Scout, once I picked it up off the coffee table to hand it to him and the lock screen snapped on instantly like it had been waiting for me. He laughed, said the company installed new security protocols. NDA stuff, he added too casually. It's annoying, I know. I wanted to believe him. I still believed in him. But that week I started noticing he didn't smell like his usual cedarwood and clean soap when he came home. It was sharper now, spicier, like something you'd wear to impress, not survive a boardroom. I asked about it, teasing. New cologne, he grinned and waved it off. Ambertech again, they flew in this French investor who wears cologne like armor. It rubbed off, I guess. I nodded and laughed. But somewhere in me something curled up and quieted. It was a Thursday when the moment happened. The one I can't explain away with logic or exhaustion or overthinking. It was 11:06 p.m. when I woke up, no reason, just a cold space beside me and a strange silence. The kind of silence that hums in your bones. I got up and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The light from the fridge washed the floor in silver. Jake's shoes were still by the door. Scout was curled up in her bed, tail twitching in her sleep. And then I saw him outside on the patio, lit only by the glow of his phone. He was pacing, one hand pressed to his temple, the other gripping the phone tight. His voice was low, urgent, whispered like a secret between confession and command. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone. It wasn't the voice he used for clients. It wasn't the voice he used with me. I stayed there half in shadow, half in disbelief. He ended the call, stared at the screen for a moment longer, then dropped his head and exhaled like someone just pulled a thread out of him. I went back to bed before he noticed me. When he climbed in 20 minutes later, he wrapped an arm around my waist like nothing had happened, like we were still us. but his fingers were cold. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for them. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to leave something bruised in my chest. A crack had formed, and I couldn't unsee it. I met Grace Monroe on a Thursday night that smelled like old paint and dry white wine. It was a group show, 7 artists under 30, all clay and noise and defiance. The gallery was packed, the lighting warm and flattering, the air thick with polite praise and curated rebellion. I wore a linen jumpsuit and a necklace Jake had given me 2 birthdays ago. The stone in the pendant matched my nail polish, a detail he once would have noticed. Once, Grace introduced herself after admiring a series of ceramic busts near the courtyard fountain. She was tall, with short pink hair and a kind of confidence that felt practiced but real. When I told her I ran the place, she smiled and said, "Oh wow, Jake's wife, that makes sense." I blinked. "You know Jake? Of course, we're on the same project over at Ambertech, the AI ethics rollout." She sipped her drink. "It's intense, but your husband's kind of a genius. He and Kara are the only ones who can get the investors to stop asking for daily deliverables." There it was, that name, that syllable, Kara. It landed soft but echoed like thunder in the space between us. I kept my face still, tilted my head. "Kara?" Grace nodded, laughing like it was common knowledge. "Kara Lopez, UX lead, red hair, sharp as hell. She and Jake are like this." She crossed 2 fingers dramatically. "Seriously inseparable in pitch meetings. I think even the clients assume they're a package deal at this point." I made a sound, some hybrid of agreement and distraction. Grace didn't notice. She was too busy talking about how Kara once shut down a full stakeholder room with a single slide. They finish each other's sentences. It's almost annoying how synced up they are. Synced up. That phrase lodged itself into the back of my throat and refused to move. I nodded along, smiled politely, made a note about artist pricing just to keep my hands busy, but I was somewhere else entirely. I was in my kitchen last week, watching Jake type something on his phone and tilt the screen away when I walked past. I was back on the patio, staring at the outline of his silhouette as he whispered into the phone at 11 p.m. I was in bed, remembering how he'd pulled me close but kept his eyes open long after I'd turned away. I hadn't heard her name before, not once, and that in itself was the clue. Jake told me everything, or at least he used to. Clients, deadlines, annoyances with coworkers who used too many exclamation marks, but never Kara, never the woman he was inseparable with. I thanked Grace, excused myself to check on the wine refill station, and slipped into the back office, shutting the door behind me. There was no panic yet, not quite, but my fingers were already unlocking my phone, already searching the company LinkedIn page for Ambertech, already scrolling until I saw her. Cara Lopez, red hair, perfect skin, UX director, Stanford, 4 mutual connections, one of them was Jake. She looked like someone who got invited to conferences in Italy and gave keynote speeches in minimalist jumpsuits. I stared at her photo longer than I should have, not with jealousy, not yet, just annoying sense of recognition or maybe displacement. I didn't know who she was, but my gut already did. And some part of me, the part that had learned to listen without flinching, whispered quietly, "This isn't nothing." I didn't sleep that night. After the gallery closed and the wine glasses were rinsed and the art left to breathe in the dark, I went home and lay next to a man I suddenly wasn't sure I knew. Jake was already asleep, back turned, breathing slow and even. His phone rested screen down on the nightstand as always. Scout snored softly at the foot of the bed. Everything looked normal, too normal, like a crime scene someone had scrubbed clean before the cops showed up. I stared at the ceiling and whispered her name. Kara, not in anger, not yet, just curiosity laced with dread. How long had she been in his life, and how long had I been quietly edited out? The next morning, I opened my laptop and made a spreadsheet, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. I'm not the woman who snoops through phones or hires private investigators. But I am a woman who reads metrics, who builds marketing timelines, who tracks user behavior and patterns. And suddenly my marriage looked like a case study in subtle shifts. Column A, date. Column B, his excuse. Column C, actual behavior. Column D, gut feeling. I started going back, 1 month, 2, then 3. I checked our shared calendar, his out-of-office notifications, our bank statements. At first, it was small things. Dinners he said were work meetings that never showed up on his expense reports. Uber receipts from downtown bars when he claimed to be at the office. Then there was the hotel. It showed up on the joint credit card. Hotel Cecilia, room 417, a boutique spot near the Riverwalk, a place with moody lighting and velvet couches. He stayed there on a Tuesday, the same night he texted, "Late meeting ran over." Crashing at the office? Except he hadn't crashed at the office. He'd crashed in a king-sized bed surrounded by incense and leather. I sat back and stared at the line item. The date, the room number, my own naivety, the unfamiliar cologne that wasn't incidental. That wasn't some French investor rubbing off on his collar. It was a choice, a curated scent, a mood-setting fragrance you wear when you're not coming home. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. His new shirts, the Apple Watch he bought without telling me, the fact that he'd started hitting the gym again just for energy, he said, but I hadn't seen a single dumbbell move in our garage in months. He never mentioned Kara, not once, but her presence started bleeding into every corner of our lives now that I knew to look. Her fingerprints were in the pauses, in the vague smiles, in the way Jake said it's just work and wouldn't meet my eyes. My journal became my investigation log. I stopped asking questions aloud and started asking them on paper. I used bullet points. Color-coded tags, red for confirmed lies, yellow for suspicious gaps, blue for things that still stupidly hurt. At some point, I started taking screenshots, his calendar, his texts. His expense reports, not because I was ready to confront him, but because I needed to build a story with a beginning, middle, and end, just like the ones I helped artists tell in my gallery, except this one wasn't abstract. It was a portrait, a sharp, high-resolution image of deceit, and I was framing it piece by piece, not because I needed to prove anything to him, but because I needed to believe it myself. I didn't want to bring Tori into it, not at first. She's known Jake almost as long as I have. She toasted at our wedding. She helped us pick the tile for our kitchen. For years, she referred to him as the unicorn, the husband who actually listened, actually shared chores, actually showed up. So saying I think he's lying to me felt like dragging a sacred object through the mud. But Tori's a lawyer, a good one. The kind that doesn't flinch when things get complicated, and I needed someone who didn't flinch because I'd stopped trusting my own reactions. We met on a Sunday morning at an all-hours brunch spot in Hyde Park. I didn't even eat, just pushed eggs around my plate while she sipped black coffee and studied my face. Talk, she said gently after 10 minutes of silence. I told her everything about Grace, about Kara, about the spreadsheet. About the hotel, Tori didn't interrupt. She just nodded slowly like she'd already heard the story in 100 different variations and knew exactly how it ended. Do you want confirmation, she asked quietly, or closure? I don't know, I said, maybe just context, proof, something my brain can lean on when my heart tries to lie. She nodded again and reached for her tablet. Give me your login. I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust her, but because it made it real, like this wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was investigation. Still, I typed it in, she started scrolling, and then we both stopped. Line item, Hotel Cecilia, April 3rd, $426.98. Line item, The Monarch Room Fine Dining, April 4th, $214.72. Line item, Azure Jewelers, April 4th, $590. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language. April 3rd. That was the weekend Jake said he was in Vegas for a tech conference. He even sent me a photo, him at some panel smiling with a lanyard, a blurry crowd behind him. But now I wondered, was that from a previous trip or someone else's photo altogether? Tori clicked on the jeweler's charge. This place doesn't sell anything under 500 unless you count cufflinks. Looks like he bought something nice. I could barely breathe. He told me he hated jewelry, said it felt showy. Guess he changed his mind, she said softly. My hands were shaking. I reached for my water and missed. Tori placed a hand on mine. Mads, this is more than stress, this is strategy. She was right, this wasn't a flirtation, it wasn't a moment of weakness. Jake hadn't just drifted. He'd chosen, he'd booked a hotel, bought her dinner, given her jewelry. All while I was home rearranging his sock drawer and researching wineries in Napa. The sickest part was I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just went quiet inside, like someone had shut off the lights, but I could still hear the power humming. Tori waited, she didn't offer platitudes, just let the silence stretch between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. I need copies of everything, I said finally, my voice low but certain. Screenshots, statements, the works. She nodded. I'll email them to you. I stood to leave. Tori stood too. Mads, I looked back. You don't have to decide what to do right now, but whatever you choose, you're not crazy. You saw the pattern before you saw the proof. That's not weakness, that's intuition. I drove home in silence, the city blurring past my window like it didn't want to be seen. He's cheating, there was no doubt left. No gray area, no benefit of the doubt, just a choice he made again and again without me. And now it was my turn. I didn't cry. That surprised me, not because I didn't want to, but because somewhere between the bank statements, the hotel charges, and the jewelry receipt, something inside me had solidified, hardened, like grief that had been left out in the sun too long. Brittle, sharp-edged, cold, so no, I didn't cry, I planned. I closed my laptop, went into the back room of the gallery, and stood in front of the supply closet. For a long time, I just looked at the cardstock. Ivory, thick, expensive, the kind I'd ordered for our limited edition artist print series, paper meant for beauty, for permanence. And then I wrote the note, not with a pen, but with the antique gold fountain marker Jake had given me last Christmas. He said it was for real things, not receipts or grocery lists. So I used it for this, 14 words, one sentence, no curse words, no threats, Napa S off the table, hope she prefers Riesling over Merlot, good luck explaining this. I practiced the spacing 3 times before writing it on the final card. My handwriting was steady, elegant, almost impersonal. I wanted it to read like a label at an art exhibit, deceptively simple. But devastating, I sealed the card inside a cream envelope unmarked. Then I did something I knew he'd never expect. I texted him, I have a surprise for you, it's almost our anniversary, come to the gallery next Friday night, 7 p.m, wear something nice. He responded in under a minute, can't wait, should I be nervous? I stared at the screen, only if you've been keeping secrets. I added a wink emoji, a joke, a test. A lie wrapped in a ribbon. He wrote back a laughing gif of some actor dramatically sweating. I watched it loop 4 times before closing the thread. Then I set the real plan in motion. That week, I quietly pulled a few strings with my assistant, Sophie, to stage a pop-up exhibit, nothing too flashy, just a private preview of a new artist series that didn't exist. I sent out a handful of invites to make it feel legit, but mostly I wanted the gallery empty when Jake walked in. I curated the room myself, one large canvas on the far wall, abstract, dramatic, blood tones, a hint of gold. Beneath it, I placed a pedestal. On the pedestal, a wine crate, rustic, familiar. Inside the crate, a bottle of the same red from our first trip to Fredericksburg, 2 glasses, and the envelope. The idea wasn't just to confront him, it was to interrupt him, to crack his fantasy down the middle, to remind him visually, emotionally, viscerally of the life he was betraying, and of the woman who wasn't going to wait in the wings, wilted and wounded, hoping for breadcrumbs. That week, I barely spoke to him, just enough smiles, just enough eye contact to keep the illusion afloat. Every time he reached for me, I let him. Every time he looked into my eyes, I made sure he saw nothing but warmth. I was no longer looking for answers. I was building a stage, and Friday night, Jake Harper was going to walk straight into his own exhibit, and for once I was done playing curator, I was going to let the work speak for itself. Friday arrived cloaked in spring sun and gallery hush. I wore black, not out of mourning, but as a kind of armor. A sleek sleeveless dress, hair swept back, lipstick just one shade deeper than usual. I wanted to look composed, controlled, like the woman who'd curated this moment with surgical precision because I had. The gallery buzzed with soft chatter, friends, clients, a few curious collectors I'd invited just to give the event weight. It wasn't a full crowd, maybe 30 people, but enough to create atmosphere, enough to murmur. Sophie handled the front. I stayed in the second room, sipping chilled Prosecco and floating between small talk and stillness. And then at 7:12, Jake arrived. He wore the navy sport coat he always defaulted to when he wanted to look impressive without trying too hard. His hair was neatly styled, his smile easy. He scanned the room, found me, and his face lit up like old times. I smiled back, nothing too warm. Just enough to keep him walking. He greeted a few guests along the way, people he didn't know, laughing like he belonged here. When he reached me, he leaned in to kiss my cheek. I let him. It felt foreign, like contact with an outdated version of himself. "You look incredible," he said, then added with a wink. "Should I be scared?" "No," I said softly, handing him a glass. "Not yet," he laughed. I gestured toward the final room. "The last piece is through there. I saved it for you." He nodded and took a sip, oblivious. Then he walked toward the final space, the smallest room in the gallery, intentionally sparse. I followed a few steps behind, just close enough to watch it land. The lighting in that room was moody, intimate, just one overhead track illuminating the wall, and on that wall, the centerpiece. A 40 by 60-inch framed print, ink washed and stylized, the colors pulled just enough to turn realism into metaphor. A man and a woman stepping out of a boutique hotel, their faces not fully visible, blurred slightly in the edges, abstract to most. But to him, unmistakable. His posture changed the moment he saw it, like someone had unplugged his spine. He stepped closer, closer still. His wine glass tilted but didn't spill. His breathing slowed, then sped up. The plaque beneath the image read simply, "Observation 14 Patterns of Disappearance." He said nothing, but I watched his skin pale, watched his eyes flick from the blurred figure of himself in the image to the red-haired woman beside him. Kara, the photo had been taken from across the street, framed through a glass window, the kind of angle used in street photography or surveillance. Jake blinked hard once, twice, then the whispering started from behind, from the other guests who'd followed him into the room, patrons, peers, my assistant, our friends, just murmurs. "Is that him? Wait, is that? Looks like, oh my God." He turned to look at me as if searching for some other meaning, but I didn't move. I just stood in the doorway, hands clasped, like a woman watching a fire she set on purpose. "Madeline," he finally breathed. I raised my glass slightly. "Thank you for coming." He looked back at the photo, jaw tight, throat working like he couldn't swallow. "Is this?" he began, but the words didn't finish. "Do you recognize it?" I asked, voice calm. "I thought you might." The gallery around us hushed, the sound falling away like curtain fabric. He shook his head once, reflexively, uselessly. "This isn't fair." "Neither is lying to your wife for 6 months," I replied evenly. His hand dropped to his side. The wine glass remained in his grip, but he seemed unaware of it. The buzz of conversation swelled again around him. He could hear it now, feel it, the exposure, the unraveling. I turned slowly and walked away. I didn't need to stay and watch him fall apart. I already knew how the picture ended. He called me 5 times that night. The first came 15 minutes after I left the gallery. The screen lit up with Jake Harper, but I didn't answer. I watched the phone vibrate silently on my kitchen counter, then die down like a bug trapped under glass. He tried again and again. Voicemails piled up, no anger, just disbelief, confusion, pleas layered with the desperate tones of a man who hadn't expected the mask to come off in public. By the fourth call, he was whispering. Like maybe Kara was still beside him, like maybe his entire world hadn't just cracked down the middle. By the fifth, he was crying. I turned my phone off and let the silence settle in. I didn't want to hear his voice anymore, so I gave him an answer the only way he would understand, without a word. I changed the locks that afternoon. The locksmith didn't ask questions. He was young, efficient, polite. When he handed me the new keys, I thanked him, closed the door behind him, and stood for a long time in the hallway, just breathing in the stillness. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. I placed the manila envelope on the kitchen island, centered, clean. Inside, the divorce papers, already signed, already filed. On top of the envelope, I left one final message, handwritten in my cleanest, steadiest lettering. "You didn't end our marriage, you just signed it over to the truth." I didn't add my name. He didn't deserve the comfort of my signature. I took Scout to my sister S for the weekend, packed a small overnight bag, turned off the porch light, left the keys taped to the inside of the mailbox just like he used to do when I forgot mine back in year 1. At exactly 10:37 p.m. he arrived. The doorbell camera caught him stepping onto the porch, jacket rumpled, face pale and wrecked, bouquet of tulips in one hand like some script he thought might work. He tried the door, it didn't open. His shoulders sagged, then he looked up at the camera, unsure if I was watching. I was, not in real time. He pulled his phone out of his coat and stared at it for a long time, then slowly he opened the mailbox. When he saw the envelope, he stilled. I imagined the moment, him peeling it open, seeing the legal letterhead, the formality of the signatures, and finally my note. 14 words, no threats, no venom, just the truth. The man who once made me feel safe now looked like a ghost standing in the place where our life used to be. He didn't knock, he didn't scream. He just stood there for a long time, holding a bouquet of tulips that would never reach the vase I once kept on our dining table. And then he walked away. Not because I told him to, but because finally he understood that I was done waiting for the man I married to come home. He wasn't coming back, and neither was I. You don't always get closure in the moment. Sometimes it trickles in like sunlight through dusty blinds, slow, quiet, and just enough to make you squint. It started 2 weeks after the gallery night. I didn't ask for updates, but people have a way of delivering them anyway through half-accidental texts, passive mentions in mutual circles, whispered sidebars during openings. Jake's company found out. Ambertech may have been forward-thinking with their AI models, but they were still old-fashioned when it came to image. Conflict of interest, someone called it. Bad optics, said someone else. That photo, the blurred one in the exhibit, had circulated just enough in private Slack channels to spark questions. Kara was quietly reassigned to a satellite project in Phoenix. Less visibility, no press, no travel. Jake didn't get the promotion. The CTO role he'd been chasing slipped from his hands like water through open fingers. I imagine they smiled when they told him, said it wasn't personal, said it was about fit and timing. But he knew, everyone knew, their fling, if that's even the right word, burned fast and ugly after that. 6 awkward weeks, that's all it took for the adrenaline to die and the consequences to calcify. Kara moved out of the downtown loft she'd sublet to be closer to Jake's side of town. Last I heard, she deleted her Instagram and started dating someone from legal. I don't feel anger toward her, not anymore. She got her piece of the wreckage, we all did. As for Jake, he texted me 3 times after the divorce was finalized. No long monologues, just small, pitiful scraps of memory he hoped might still hold meaning. Do you remember that little taco place on 2nd? Scout used to sleep between us like a barrier we never asked for. I hope you're happy. I mean that. I didn't respond, because by then I was already gone. I sold the bungalow. It hurt more than I expected. The hallway where we marked the doorframe with anniversaries and inches, the squeaky drawer in the kitchen he could never fix, the jasmine bush I planted the first spring we moved in. But I didn't want to live in a place that used to be ours, so I let it go. I packed up what mattered, Scout, my books, 3 crates of artwork, and left Austin behind. I landed in Santa Fe not because I needed to escape, but because I needed to begin. The city hums differently here. It's quieter, richer in stillness. The air smells like pine and red dust. The nights are long, the mornings slow. It felt like the kind of place where a woman could reinvent her silence into song. I opened a new studio off Canyon Road, a creative space for women artists, sculptors, photographers, storytellers who know how to turn pain into shape. We call it the Marrow Collective, because that's where real art comes from, the deepest part of the bone, the quiet truth that lives under everything we build. People ask me sometimes if I miss him. If I regret not hearing him out, I don't, because I didn't need more words from him. I needed the space to write my own. And for the first time in a long time, every brushstroke, every breath, every morning with Scout at my feet feels entirely mine. No shadows, no noise, just the echo of a woman who walked through fire and came out clearer. It's been a year. 12 full months since I stood in that gallery hallway and watched the life I'd built collapse under the weight of a single photograph. And now here I am sitting outside a sunlit cafe in Santa Fe, sketchbook open, espresso cooling beside my elbow, and the air thick with desert stillness and soft possibility. This place doesn't rush you. The mornings stretch long and golden. The silence doesn't ask to be filled. I've learned how to breathe again here, how to be still without fearing what might rise inside the quiet. My studio is just 3 blocks down. The Marrow Collective started as an idea scratched on a napkin, ironic really, considering how everything once ended with a note on a napkin. But this space, it became more than therapy, it became purpose. We host workshops now. Women come in carrying fragments of grief, betrayal, burnout, and we teach them to mold it into something they can hold. Clay, canvas, light, shadow, we reclaim ourselves with color. Today I'd taken the morning off, a luxury I never used to allow myself. Scout is dozing under the table, her gray muzzle twitching as she dreams. I'm halfway through a loose sketch of the couple sitting near the window, hands almost touching, not quite brave enough. A girl, maybe 19, lingers beside my table, sketchbook in her arms, eyes bright with curiosity. "You're Madeline Harper, right?" she asks, voice soft like she's unsure whether to interrupt. I nod. "I saw your exhibit last fall," she continues. "The one with the hotel silhouette and the wine crate, it changed something in me." I smile, close my book. "Are you an artist?" I ask. She hesitates. "Trying to be." "I came here for a portfolio residency. They said you mentor sometimes." I nod again. "Sometimes when the story's strong." She bites her lip, then blurts, "Have you ever been betrayed?" The question doesn't sting, not anymore. It lands gently, like a feather brushing a healed scar. I look up at the sky, bright, endless, and back at her. Once, I say, but I painted something better with what was left. Her eyes soften. She asks if she can sit. I slide the second chair toward her with my foot and hand her half of my biscotti. We don't speak for a while, just sketch, just sip, and I realize something. I am not waiting for happiness anymore. I am living inside it, quietly, unapologetically, that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's rebirth.